Stephanie, and welcome to the Reading Room. This is the playlist where I review what I read in the last month, and I do my best to keep it spoiler-free, or if I am going to spoil anything, I warn you and I do put a timestamp so you can jump over spoilers. I also want to say, as I say in all my reviews, these are solely about the books and not about the authors as people. So let's go ahead and dive in and talk about the books that I read in September. So first up was Darling Girls by Sally Hepworth, and this is my first title by Hepworth, even though I think I have like 3 on my shelf, including this one. But the weather here in Denver was still very, very warm at the start of September, so I figured even though this is like screaming summer vibes, it still kind of fit. So I went ahead and squeezed this in before the weather turns fully fall, which I'm now filming this in October and it's like 82 degrees today. Not sure if we're really gonna get that much of a cool fall, but let's go ahead and see what this promised. For as long as they can remember, Jessica, Nora, and Alicia have been told how lucky they are. As young girls, they were rescued from family tragedies and raised by a loving foster mother, Miss Fairchild, on an idyllic farming estate and given an elusive second chance at a happy family life. But their childhood wasn't the fairy tale everyone thinks it was. Miss Fairchild had rules. Miss Fairchild could be unpredictable. And Miss Fairchild was never ever to be crossed. In a moment of desperation, the 3 broke away from Miss Fairchild and thought they were free. Even though they never saw her again, she was always somewhere in the shadows of their minds. When a body is discovered under the home they grew up in, the foster sisters find themselves thrust into the spotlight as key witnesses. Or are they prime suspects? A thrilling page-turner by best-selling author Sally Hepworth of Sisterhood, Secrets, Love, and Murder. Overall, I really liked this. I thought it was well plotted, well paced, and my god, if the titular Darling Girls didn't end Miss Fairchild, I was going to hop into the book and do it for them. It was a really good look at how insidious some people can be and how sometimes inflicting pain doesn't just leave physical bruises. Now, I do want to give a trigger warning that there is child harm and child endangerment discussed on page in this, not just alluded to. So if that's a trigger for you, probably not the best read. I do have to say, this being marketed as a thriller is a bit misleading, as it definitely read more like mystery and a slow burn mystery at that. The mystery is good and I did like it, don't get me wrong. But again, I feel like so many books try and classify themselves as thrillers when there were some thrills, but it wasn't that high level tension that you constantly feel in a really good thriller. I will say I did love the relationships between the sisters and how well they knew each other and how to read each other's moods and know what they're feeling without having to say it. These girls understood each other and loved each other, and I loved that aspect of the book, their sisterhood. Their bond was portrayed so well, and it was such a positive element of the book too. They still have each other no matter what they've been through together. Though I do have to say I love them, but everyone else around them is kind of awful. Every adult in this book failed these young girls, and in a way it made for a very frustrating read at times just because of the injustice of it all, but then again it's very eye-opening and very moving. But the main ladies of this are fantastic. They're each still battling their own inner demons and unhealthy coping mechanisms that they adopted growing up in this household. I really like Nora the best, as she's a feisty bitch who is not afraid to punch a creep in the face. But on the same side, she did kind of annoy me at times because her temper got the better of her all the time. She had no control over it. And given how old she is when we're following her in the book, I just expected her to have grown a little bit more. In a way, she kind of reminded me of Samantha Jones from Sex and the City, if Sam had a lot more rage and more frequent, violent outbursts. Now, the book itself does flip back and forth between a few timelines, but overall it was really easy to keep track of everything. I liked the characters, and I was compelled to keep reading and figure out what was really going on at their old foster home. So we also get these sections with a Dr. Warren, who's a therapist, and a woman, but she's not named for quite a while, so you do have that other mystery element of like trying to figure out like whose story are you actually following here. His sections really annoyed me as he's the most incompetent therapist ever. And I just wish that it was his body that was found under the house. I get why we have his sections to tell that story, but he really grossed me out. So another thing I did appreciate was that all the subplots were wrapped up by the end, but I do wish they had been spaced out a bit more. Like all of the girls' subplots are wrapped up at pretty much the same time, and it was just a lot to process. Plus, it was a little too like cozy mystery wrap-up style for a book that dealt with some pretty serious and heavy topics. At times, I also expected Miss Fairchild just to launch into like a villain monologue, as her dialogue in places was a little cartoonish, but she was a very interesting antagonist. Now, I did love the final twist in this story, and I kind of expected it, but was pleased nonetheless. It made sense, and it made the book a little more wicked. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars, as it was a great read. There was a good mystery, a good amount of suspense, and some tension as we really just wait for the axe to fall on some of these characters' choices. I really appreciate that the conclusion wrapped things up and gave me all the answers and resolutions that I was looking for. This one was a really hard one to put down while I was reading it. Though I must point out that I don't know if it's just because I have like the Book of the Month version, but my copy was riddled with typos or extra letters randomly tacked onto words, or simply the wrong version of a word. Like, a character says that they want peace and quiet, but peace is spelled P-I-E-C-E instead of P-E-A-C-E. Wake up, editor! Again, maybe it's just the Book of the Month version, but it really took me out of the story. So like I said, I do have a few other titles by Hepworth on my TBR shelves, and I'm really excited to get into those, probably in like December or January, when I'll finally be done with like my spooky season backlog. Next up was The Paris Widow by Kimberly Belle, which I received in my Books for Coffee subscription with the book drop. I saved this for September as my husband and I were in Paris over Labor Day weekend last year, and so I really wanted to revisit the city through this book around that same time. I also have to say this is not my first title by Belle, and I find her reads to be pretty like decent popcorn thrillers. So let's go ahead and see what this one promised. When Stella met Adam, she thought she had finally found a nice, normal guy. A welcome change from her previous boyfriend and her precarious jet-setter lifestyle with him. But her secure world comes crashing down when Adam goes missing after an explosion in the city square. Unable to reach him, she panics. As the French police investigate, it's revealed that Adam was on their radar as a dealer of rare and stolen antiquities, with a long roster of criminal clients. Reeling from this news, Stella is determined not to leave Paris until she has the full story. Was Adam a random victim, or the target of the explosion? And why is someone following her through the streets of Paris? An irresistible, fast-paced thriller set in some of Europe's hottest spots, The Paris Widow shows that no matter how far we travel, our secrets always stay with us. So this totally met my expectations of Belle's work. This is definitely a popcorn thriller. It's going to keep you entertained, but I will say the more you think about it, the more the story does unravel just a little bit. I will say I was getting a little bit worried at about the 40% mark that something was going to happen or be revealed that would cause not necessarily a plot hole, but a characterization inconsistency. And I was right. Now, it did not ruin the book for me, but I wasn't exactly pleased that that was the direction that Belle took things. It felt like a cheap way to set up a twist, but it only works if the characters know they're in a book and have to act a certain way until that reveal. It was annoying, but not so much so that I ended up hate reading this. I really liked this. I enjoyed this. I could not put this down as well. I really like Stella, our main point of view character, as we do get chapters from Adam, but I will say there were times that she was a little bit melodramatic and whiny for my tastes. But I did appreciate that she actually did the work and tried to figure out what happened to Adam and located clues and figured out what they meant. She wasn't only just like wringing her hands waiting for news about him. Like, she was going out into Paris and going to find him. Love to see a girl who takes action. Adam's chapters did read a little bit like filler. Like, sure, it does help round out his character and show their life together, but if his sections were to go missing in a copy of this book, I don't think it would really impact the story, or it wouldn't be that detrimental. I really did enjoy the exploration into the world of art and antiquities, and how there's a dark side to that world that's fueled by greed and nefarious collectors. It kind of reminded me of National Treasure in how Adam values the history and the beautiful craftsmanship of the pieces that he collects, just like Nicolas Cage with his history stuff and caring for the documents that he collects or steals. And then there's the other people that want it just because they want it. They don't care about the significance behind it. They just want to be able to show it off. I also think that this had a really good amount of tension, and this definitely had more action than other books that I've read by Belle, or at least that was what I felt at first. Once this gets going, it's going like the Energizer Bunny. This was a really quick read, it was entertaining, and again, the definition of like a good popcorn thriller. Suspend some disbelief, but if you're looking for a book that's going to keep you engaged and entertained while reading it, and potentially if you're traveling to Paris, this is a really good pick. Though apparently, according to Goodreads, the audiobook version is not great, or it doesn't have really high reviews. It seems like a lot of people were frustrated by the narrator for Stella. My feelings of Stella being a bit whiny and melodramatic is overdone, apparently, in the audiobook, and I saw a lot of reviewers who said they had to turn it off and switch to the physical copy of the book, but do with that what you will. So next up was a book that I was so excited for, The September House by Carissa Orlando. So let's go ahead and see what this one promised and why I had it sitting on my shelf until September. When Margaret and her husband Hal bought the large Victorian house on Hawthorne Street for sale at a surprisingly reasonable price, they couldn't believe they finally had a home of their own. Then they discovered the hauntings. Every September, the walls drip blood. The ghosts of former inhabitants appear, and all of them are terrified of something that lurks in the basement. Most people would flee. Margaret is not most people. After 4 years, Margaret has learned how to live with the house. It's her house, after all. But Hal can't take it anymore, and he leaves abruptly. Now he's not returning calls, and their daughter Catherine, who knows nothing about the hauntings, arrives intent on looking for her missing father. To make things worse, September has just begun, and with every attempt Margaret and Catherine make to find Hal, the hauntings grow more harrowing, because there are some secrets the house needs to keep. I'm not going to bury the lead here. This was a struggle. I contemplated DNFing quite a few times. I had absolutely no desire to pick this up each night. For a book about a haunted house that should be right up my alley, this was so boring and repetitive. Like, Margaret is used to the ghosts and the blood dripping down the walls, and she just acts like the ghosts are like her annoying kids who want to play with dolls but will tell her exactly what the dolls have to say and do. She just seems really tired of it, but still goes along with it. I found Margaret to be really flat and boring. Now, I do want to give credit where credit's due, because I do appreciate the book's larger themes and how it used the haunting aspect to tell a different type of story. But at the end of the day, for me, it wasn't enough to save the horrendously slow plot. I was pretty sure that I was going to be a ghost myself by the time I finished reading this. Again, it's just so repetitive. It's basically Margaret wakes up tired from the ghost screaming all night. Frederica, the friendly ghost, makes her a cup of tea and brings her toast. How she's able to hold on to these things, I don't know. So Margaret then takes her tea and toast and goes and sits in her art studio debating if she wants to paint today. Nope, back downstairs for some tea and time to point out that the ghosts are pointing at the basement door. She thinks about her husband. She thinks about her daughter. Has more tea. Frederica makes her dinner. More tea. And then it's off to bed. And just repeat and repeat and repeat. It just really felt like the plot doesn't progress for the first 200 some pages. I really don't think it even really had my attention until 125 pages in. And then I don't know what the hell was going on for those last 30 pages. Because yes, I stuck it out. I finished this. I finished it. But honestly, that ending read like a completely different book. It was unintentionally hilarious how this book ended. I really think that this book struggled in that it didn't know what it wanted to be, because it wanted to be a deeper story, but it kind of didn't. It wanted to be a scary ghost story, but it kind of didn't. I can see what Orlando was going for, and this could have been great, but it isn't. There's also some dark humor in this, and I did chuckle at times, but sweet Satan, is this book slow and just so boring. Minus a few random good scenes. So some of the book blurbs on the back just make me, they make me laugh. Simone St. James, who I love. I think she writes fantastic ghost stories. Shocking, electrifying, and absolutely original, Carissa Orlando takes us on a journey that moves from savagely funny, is it funny? To terrifying with the turn of a page. It's an unflinching exploration of the dark things we don't talk about, and it's a must-read for horror fans. Simone, don't lie to me. This is not a must-read. I don't know. Or there's this other one. Peel back the yellow wallpaper, check out of the overlook, and say farewell to Hill House. There's a new haunted house on the market, and a Carissa Orlando is the realtor of our nightmares. You'll never want to leave once you start reading. Lies. I wanted to get out of this immediately. All y'all are liars. So I'm going to be nice, and I'm going to give this 2 stars, as it is a debut, and I can see promise in Orlando. But overall, this was a no from me, dog. So next up was the book for my book club, which was The Sanatorium by Sarah Pearse. Let's go ahead and see what this promised. The newly renovated Hotel Les Sommets, I'm probably not saying that correct because it's French, but a former sanatorium high in the Swiss Alps has long been plagued by dark rumors. When Detective Ellen Warner's estranged brother Isaac and his fiancée Laurie, I'm probably mispronouncing her name too, invite her to celebrate their engagement at the hotel, Ellen reluctantly accepts. Arriving in the midst of a threatening storm, Ellen immediately begins to feel on edge. And when Laurie suddenly vanishes, Ellen must trust her instincts if they hope to find her. When the snow cuts off all access to Les Sommets, the remaining guests start to panic. Then another woman disappears, and she's the only person who could have warned them of just how much danger they are all in. So this was mid, as the kids say. To say something positive, the setting was really well done. I must say, I could feel the cold from the blizzard and the surrounding snow. I could picture the hotel quite vividly, so I do think that Pearse excels in setting the stage and really just making that setting come to life. The setting was also unique too, in that it was a high-end resort built inside a standing sanatorium, so she really created some great atmosphere, and I did understand the layout of this hotel, which made following the action a lot easier. But it felt like at the end that Pearse was trying to do too much, or just simply trying too hard. The ending just felt like it was constantly building and building, and then it just deflated like a sad balloon. There were a lot of themes and twists that just really felt like they were shoehorned in for the sake of having a lot of twists. Again, kind of like September House, I think the themes that this book covers are important, but I don't think the groundwork was laid out earlier in the story. So the ending, when a lot of the themes are really brought to the forefront, it just felt like it came out of nowhere and was really in your face. If the theme is strong and it works with the story, we as the readers will pick it up naturally. I don't need for the theme to be spelled out. It felt like I was told what I was supposed to take away from this book, and just in general, this book did a lot of telling. Now, I did see that this is part of a series, and I gotta say, I wasn't that attached to, I call her Ellen, it might be Elin, it's E-L-I-N, not entirely sure, but I'm just gonna say Ellen because that's how I've been saying it. But I didn't feel that attached to Ellen to continue reading about her in her other books in her series. If we're setting up a character-based series, make me love the character and want to see her in different settings and stories. Like, I'll admit it, I'm basic enough to enjoy Dan Brown and like his Robert Langdon books because I like the character of Robert. I enjoy seeing him go through these different scenarios. I don't really like Ellen that much to want to follow her. I wanted a lot more depth to her. Like, Pearse tried giving her some like past trauma that she's dealing with, but she deals with it very quickly, and I didn't really feel any connection to that cathartic moment where she's overcoming her past issues. She just felt really aloof, and they talk about how like she's coming alive during this investigation, and I didn't see it. I didn't really feel anything with her relationship to not only her work, but also her brother and her romantic partner. I felt like there was a wall between Ellen and me. Like, let me in if you want me to continue reading this series. So with this, not only was the ending a bit meh, but the final reveal is a disappointment and overall pretty weak. Unmasking the villain, quite literally in this story, and uncovering their motivation didn't really fit, or it felt too far-fetched. I did not buy the killer's motivations. I don't think they lined up with their actions and the body count that we ended up getting. It just became really convoluted, and again, felt like we had a lot of twists for twist's sake. They didn't add anything to the story. I can totally see what Pearse was going for with this, and it had a good combination of elements, like the locked room murder mystery, but it just didn't come together very well. I originally was going to give this 3 out of 5 stars, but after talking with my book club and like hearing other people's perspectives and thinking about it more, this is honestly getting lowered to a 2.5. I read it. I've read worse, but I've also read a lot better. All right, last this month was There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins, which was the perfect segue into spooky season. So let's go ahead and see what this promised. It's been almost a year since Makani Young came to live with her grandmother, and she's still adjusting to her new life in rural Nebraska. Then, one by one, the students of her high school begin to die in a series of gruesome murders, each with increasing and grotesque flair. As the body count rises and the terror grows closer, will Makani survive the killer's twisted plan? So I'm gonna say this gave me all the Scream nostalgia vibes. Like, it is YA, but I really do think that worked for the story. If you're not new to my channel, you know that YA is not typically my jam, but I loved this. Excluding some of the slang that definitely places this in like the 2020s, I honestly picture the characters running around in 90s clothing as it felt so screamy. Screamish? No, but I'm gonna go with screamy. But instead of Sydney, we have Makani, who is our final girl, who has moved to the cornfields of Nebraska due to a dark secret of her past. And she's had to leave her parents and home in Hawaii and move in with her maternal grandmother. I really liked Grandma. She was stern, she set appropriate boundaries, but obviously had a lot of love for her granddaughter and was not absent. She never had to act like an idiot so that the plot could happen, or so Makani could get away with things, and I really appreciated that. Because one of the things that Makani is trying to be sneaky about is her relationship with a character named Ollie. I did like that the book addressed safer sex practices, which is great to see in books that younger adults are going to be reading, and I also think that a lot of the sex conversations felt very true to life and very just teens being teens. Their romance was fine. It really worked as a subplot, but I do think sometimes it felt like Perkins wanted it to be the main plot and then like threw us into a bloody murder scene to remind us that this book is about a killer terrorizing a town. So I do just wish maybe there had been a little bit more better balance. I have seen some reviews that say like Perkins is known for her romance books. I can totally see that, understanding it through that lens, because again, like there are times that it's really skewing romance when I'm like, so we just left a murder scene and now we're going to talk about people making out? Like, that's some whiplash. I also really did like Makani's friends, so she has 2 friends as side characters. I do think I liked one more than the other, as Alex kind of annoyed me. Like, she likes to start shit and stir the pot and would crack jokes at inappropriate times. I like Darby a little bit better. I thought he was pretty cool. I think the book also captured small town Midwest really well, where everyone knows everyone and there's not much to do besides go look at the flat plains. I also like that there were enough characters to keep me guessing as to the identity of the killer, and I kept thinking, oh, it's you. Oh, nope. Oh, it's you, while reading this. Now, on that note, the reveal of the killer comes earlier than I expected it to in this book. Like, as soon as we find out who it is, I expected there to be some sort of twist, but nope, we just get the reveal, and that's the killer until the end. We know who it is. And I didn't like that Makani and friends are able to guess the killer's motivation, and they're pretty much right. And it's mostly because the motivation is so lame. I will give credit to Perkins for not trying to pull one over on us readers and put in some sort of twist that just doesn't work or makes the plot more confusing. She had a solid story and she stuck to it, and I do appreciate that. One thing I didn't love, but I did understand it, was the reveal of Makani's dark secret. It was very anticlimactic and kind of made me go, oh, that's it? But I do understand that this is for teens, and so I get it. Perkins had to walk a fine line of coming up with something that would put Makani in the situation of having to move away, but also didn't want her to do anything that was irredeemable. I get it, but it felt like kind of a blah reveal, especially after every single chapter we hear Makani she's so scared that people are going to find out, and whatever will she do? Surely someone knows the terrible things she's done. He's looking at me funny. He knows. He didn't text me back right away. He's found out the awful, awful truth. It was just too repetitive and gave too much buildup to something that fell really flat. So apparently there is a Netflix adaptation of this that does change the past events, which makes it both more dramatic and traumatic, and it does change the killer's motivation. Overall, everything does work in the book, but it does sound like it's a touch better in the adaptation. Again, the motivation for the killer in this book it's not great. So my biggest criticism that I have of this is the ending, because it is very, very abrupt. We get the main confrontation, and then the book is done. It's just over. I needed more closure than what this ending gave me, and maybe it really is paying homage to Scream, where we have the standoff with the killer, and boom, we're done. But that's a movie. I just wanted at least one more chapter, or even give me an epilogue to close out this story. But all in, I gave this 3 stars. It definitely held my interest. The characters felt like real teenagers, and again, I love how it reminded me of my favorite teen slasher movie, Scream. It did not shy away from the death scenes, so if gore is not your jam, you may not want to pick this up or just speed read past those sections. But if you like YA and you want a fun final girl with campy slasher vibes, I would definitely say this fits the bill. Alright, so that was everything that I read in September. Normally I ask for recommendations. I'm going to ask for recommendations for November or December reads, because I'm pretty sure I have 14 books on my October TBR that I don't think I'm going to get to, so I don't need any more books for next month. I'm already going to have to spend every night reading for 3 hours just to get through it all. But if you have any recommendations for once spooky season is done, please leave those in the comments below. Otherwise, thanks for joining me in the reading room, and I hope to see you next month.